Good morning, everyone who have been following me in this week. In the last four videos, this is the fifth one in the grouping called the Gemmfiles, a system that I have started to develop since 1991, when we're all learning from the internet and the use of the spreadsheets and the software from Microsoft. Um, And I will continue to emphasize this is the ninth month since I have decided to start in January to do more of the videos. By popular request by friends and individuals who are interested of the way I have approached in the creations of gem files from the early infancy, 1991, which our company has started in 1977, have our already 14th year into the global gem trade, mineral trades, and the distribution from magazines like Shopper Image to the selling of loose gemstones in the cruise ships, and plus the wholesale distribution, plus our annual sales in one of the greatest gemstone and mineral fair in around the world in a very informal way. 3,000, 4,000 sellers and exhibitors in the city of Tucson, and with various different groupings and presenting their wares. What I am continuing, I call this is our new age, the modern day age, in the infancy development of all that we have done on my 8+ platforms under Gemmfiles are being now interfaced into the new era, which is AI, artificial intelligence, and very much focus on the big data and the storage of the big data, meaning cloud. And the most effective way is in the use of the Chat GPT. Okay, I have been using Chat GPT. Is almost a direct reference with my other research, which is involving the development of the psychology round and square, which had led me into the era now called the pedagogy of conscience. And in the way I'm using it, and this particular first book going to be published, maybe by way of Amazon after the editing, I will be posting along the question that I have raised, sometimes extensive questions, because it just proves what we do and what the technology can be done today. In many of my share and talks are all in bits and pieces. Yesterday I may have a very complete idea. My question about the status of Christopher Columbus, no longer my question of status, that I had already confirmed in many, many ways that Christopher Columbus was never Italian, but coming from the town born in Portugal called Cuba. And the only other town after that was the Cuba he had landed. And by him naming all the other islands in the Caribbeans, those names, all these on saints, have also been the same city in the area, in the region of Portugal, with the Cuba name town where he's from. What I'm trying to indicate is that I have some hypothesis. I did my research. I did my own analysis, and now I'm putting this collective yes or no, right or wrong, valid or non-valid into the questioning format and send it directly to. In fact, I named the GPT chat of the GPT become the George, Peter, and Tom to make it more personalized. And what has been very interesting from this segment of history about Columbus. And then I have yesterday just have made the attempt to trying to understand with my own search of the Chinese history, the Chinese written language in the Shang Dynasty, and before that, which is right around 3,300 years, there is a big, huge window of myth based on the cultural anthropology standard in the West. There were no evidence of written language, even in clay pots, in ceramics, in the years, which is dating 4 to 5,000 years. But in that particular period, before Shang, before the Oracle Bones, there were tons of evidence with many of the bronzes and many of the jade carvings in the area in the northeast of China called Hongshan or the Red Hills. And from my provincial region in Zhejiang, by Hangzhou, and by the area they call it Liangshu, which is tremendous amount of the carving were found. And so history continued. My curiosity above and beyond my 5 languages, and my curiosity about in the Gregorian chant, how that Greek language had moved the Latin language by way of the church, and the Gregorian sound continue on today in many of the private mass are still being used. When you can learn Latin, when you can sing your Latin words in a Gregorian chant, and that for me has always been a way to memorize the sound or the pronunciation phonetically. Okay, because what is very much a threat, especially young people, when they don't know when the sound, the 5 sounds of Chinese or 7 sounds in the Cantonese, all that becoming a little bit of an obstacle because you have to remember the intonation. However, when you can sing a song, and when I was in Brazil, share with my Brazilian friends, I was coaching, teaching English. I was 17, 18. And then when you're singing an American song with either the Peter, Paul, and Mary or the Christian songs like Michael Rowed the Boat or the other, when you are singing in that particular format, you learn how to pronounce without worrying about the phonics. And that alone, if you love languages, that's why I have form and shape. I call it psycholinguistics. But the many vocabularies have got me into a rich area than what I have learned. By all means, there are 30,000, 40,000 Chinese characters. Maybe in what I am handling now, maybe it's under 1,500 or 1,000. But most people said if you know about 2,000 worth of Chinese, you are capable to communicate. But many years have lapsed. I left China when I was 14. I'm becoming aware of my Chinese background starting in 1973, which was the year that China was recognized by the UN. But the same curiosity I have about native Brazilians, languages, the Tupi-Guarani, with the Portuguese-based languages, or just like in the Andes Mountains with Peru, with Chile, the Mapuches, and the native tongues, but carry on with the lingua franca, the national language in those regions, is Spanish. And this link between Portuguese and Spanish and Italian, at least in the vocabulary, along with French, bring me the Romance language base, where I have just created about 4 years ago a new linguistic group called Romantina / Romancina. Is a dictionary, starting with images, with the pictures now. When you're having a picture, and I use, going back, I said that before, I'll repeat it many times. is called a train station. Okay, in Portuguese, estação, nasal, C Sicilia, and in Spanish, estación. And then listen to French, estación. In Italian, estazione. Very close. So in my mind, an idea about how can I guide the Chinese who have basically amplified their way of a globalization once the world followed the US, or until the time of Obama, before the TTP, then you get to the point of Trump and now Biden, who have decided we're not going to play the globalization, because up until then, basing on the American format, the globalization is actually the Americanization of the world. China joined WTO, China played by the rules and whatnot, and now the Chinese format, the globalization, have made the Chinese economy vibrant and something that the American have decided to block the Chinese progress. And before anything else, let me play this fair game. And by way I perceive with my years engagement now with China, my business starting in 77 is the same time when the Deng Xiaoping had given his speech in Shenzhen and motivated the Chinese to be engaged with the global trade. It doesn't matter socialism, capitalism, or communism. What Deng Xiaoping's practical way of talking about, it matters not the cat is black or white, the cat that catches mice. In other words, if you are a leader, you want to feed your country, you want to be directing your country to have an economy that's sustainable. And this is what is happening by what China had developed and what China had been trying very hard to be compliant. One key factor is a very controversial issue right now. It's about the electric vehicles. What can be more compliant for the Chinese to meet the Western ecological balance, to reduce the carbon, the emission of the vehicles? Okay. I live in the US. My family is all American. I have my very deep affection toward Brazil because 90% of my business and my wealth, which I'm continue handling the minerals and the gemstone business, were all coming out of Brazil. And thank goodness, when I got to Brazil in 1962, have acquired the Brazilian language, always curious about the vastness of Brazil and the people and the language. And I would go as far as that my heart beats on the bossa nova. We can start in the samba. And that culture, the Afro-Brazilian culture, coming out from the tribe of Yoruba, the Western Africa, from the region of Togo, Nigeria, and the tribal and the music. And we can talk about even Macumba, Umbanda, which is a black magic, or the normacy, the candomblé, the musicality, the celebration, and also how the Afro-Brazilians have adopted the Roman deities and shaping those characters into their own legend. It shows that a culture cannot be destroyed. But unfortunately, the African slavery going into the North America had vanished with the linkage with old Africa. The total misconception of the old white man culture by calling the voodoos in Haiti or in New Orleans, and that part of the America still have their linkage to the African heritage. And by the same token, I'm going to jump a little bit, base my baptismal, our conversion in the Roman Catholicism when we got to Macau, when I was from age 5, Shanghai to Macau at age 5. I was born in 48, was 52, Macau to 62. We were baptized by the Jesuits, by the school, by the mission of Matteo Ricci. And I want to highlight that name, Matteo Ricci, in this cross-cultural experience, was one of the few Western missionary from Italy with his very solid engagement with the court of the Manchu in Beijing. And he was accused by the Dominicans and the Franciscans about he was not fully engaged to evangelize the Chinese people. And Matteo Ricci, which this one of the documents still had to be discovered, he has said, these people in China need not to be evangelized. And the rest of his work, you can find all the Jesuit missions in Beijing or anywhere else. So far, I have not noticed the missions in around Southeast Asia, at least addressing this case about how he had tried to find a balance or create a fusion between the Chinese value system he highly respect with his own personal evangelical commitment to Vatican. If I have lived this little talk about partially in clusters of culture, and as I using now very frequently in my presentation, the cultural spheres. Because when you jump into a linguistic, if I speak in Portuguese the next minute, or Cantonese, or Mandarin, or Spanish, or Italian, or English, you go to a different cultural zone. Okay, what even now, if a little bit use of the hands, is a lingua corporal. It's a body language that we are very. It comes natural, and upon reflection, this use of the hands is when I was even early on into Brazil in 62 as a teenager, 14 years old. And the city is almost 80% Italian. You can talk about Sao Paulo migration from Italy all the way down to Argentina, to the southern part of Brazil. Even the slang, the local language, their slang have a touch of the Italian influence. And for example, the word president, what we say in Portuguese, in Brazil, in São Paulo, is called presidente. But if you go down further south into the Gaúcho region, the Rio Grande do Sul, and they will put down very clearly presidente. The TE is very well pronounced. All in all, these are minor things, but these minor observations when you're present the whole picture now more broadly to this audience, and giving also the credit why the command of languages had given me the edge, be that the three dialects in Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, which are my mother's tongue. My father's from Yuyao, from the same village of the famous Chinese philosopher, educator. I had translated his work, Wang Yangming, into Kantian ecology. All this, the language had given me that edge to understand and to apply to the gem trade. Basically, by me asking at the price, I said, very beautiful tourmaline. The stone is about 22 carats, and that is asking for $2,200 for the stone, which is totally understandable. And I was just using one way without sounding cheap or putting down. Now, come on, this is too expensive. Some people can go as far that how can a guy like you carry a stone like this? You don't have that kind of money. Well, this guy may be a broker, but I will using my tactic to say, well, Josette, I like the stone. It's not in my budget because every time I buy how much I'm going to spend. I said, maybe, well, I don't know. Maybe you can ask the owner what's the best he can do. My offer is $1,500. Now, when you say that as the owner, he may come up reaction, no, espera aí. This is essa minha pedra. This is my gem. Oh, I'm sorry to say. Like, right now, you know that he has the commanding price to give me a discount or not. And these are very many sets of circumstances. Now we're coming back to a little bit of the language of the gem trade. My associates in Brazil with the AI, with the technology, we both have introduced many languages, but we both talk about in the gem trade, not in a very respectful way, but not a put down, the presence of a fast gain and losses. In this case, a tourmaline asking for 22, I offer 1,500. I may get it for 1,700. I may get it for 1,800. I may not get it at all. But it shows you that is the gap. Okay, honest, dishonest. The guy highly speculated. We call it pedrismo. Pedras is stone. When you talk about the name Peter, Pedro in Brazil, in Christianity, on this rock I build my what? Congregation, assembly, church, temple, whatever. I think in the again, in the language of the time of the Christ speaking, when they're speaking Aramaic, when they're speaking Hebrew, it seems like the Judaic language was not very fluent in the speaking terms. So everything is subject to interpretation. So in the case when I'm buying this stone, asking for this gentleman, if I can have it for $1,700 or $1,500, but cushioning a potential I can get up between 16, 17, anyway, less than 2,200. What impact next? And by watching him talking, speaking, and also when I'm buying in public, people talk about I have audacity. This kind of audacity, eventually I was speaking of my other alter ego, which is the Monkey King. For me jumping after my degrees and master's degree in 3 years and creating a counseling concept. In Portuguese, pulou a cerca. I jump off the fence. I'm basically giving a double finger to the education because I've seen so many shenanigans, so many bullshit. One more point before I get back to my master's degrees in 1974, 70, before the 73, I was managing Playboy in Chicago in a nightclub. And because what I had done in Playboy, in the magazines, somebody grabbed me and asked me to join the Marriott Corporation. Why restaurants? Because I put myself through college since I arrived in 1967. Yes, 4 summers, waiting on table, 7 days a week, no day offs, working, taking over whatever waiter at the table, I assume, because I made about $2,000 to $3,000 to pay off the tuition for my college. I have a grant for 4 years as a swimmer. The chlorine had taken me away from the American pools, and I become choking, allergic to the chlorine. And University of Wisconsin at Platteville. When I was saying, I'm done, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, heading back to Brazil, I was asked to stay and went on to play 4 years soccer for the university. Thank God for the discount on my tuition, which we pay. Instead of out of state, I pay the in-state, but the rest of the expenditure from housing, lodging, I still have to pay. So from 4 years of restaurant as a waiter in a Chinese restaurant in the north side of Chicago called Golden Pheasant, I still remember very well what I have learned from these people. And Frank, wherever you are, I thank you for part of the learning. At least I learned to be humbling down from my Brazil, Sao Paulo, Zona Sul, the opulence and the affluence of Brazil. I'm coming down, work in a Chinese restaurants, waiting on table. It's a very, very humbling experience when you have the ownership of a white smoking for the summer and the winter tuxedo, and you escort the young ladies to the Portico Taputante, just like the Mexicans. They have the quinceañeros, is introducing the young lady to society. The life in Sao Paulo from 62 to 67 was we call it the Época de Oro, the period of the golden period. Sophistication, 3 clubs from Paulistano to Hebraica, where I swam for, and Pinheiros, my last year and a half playing basketball for the clubs. And these clubs, for example, we have 10 to 12 to 15 tennis courts. We have our own sauna system. We have our own basketball indoor. We have soccer fields, many play arena, and a family can spend all day in these open green areas, all within a less than 3 kilometers radius. However, the 4 years, 4 summers working as a waiter, I have learned all the skills just in case of emergency. I learned to seating people like a manager. I learned to have to make cocktail for the customers when the bartender is not available on different times. The takeout order. Of course, that's always the incentive. Those are the young girls walking in front of the desk. We become friends. You make your friendship with. There's another cultural zone in the summer in Chicago. I'm back to a ambience of the Cantonese, and super sensitively, when we're making money as going to college, there are the waiters were making their daily earning to feed the family of 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. This kind of exposure becoming a sensitivity training. In fact, they speak a dialect called Toisan, like most of the Cantonese in North America that we encounter. Um, as another learning, you become to even wipe the table in the perfect manner, not just surface. Frank Ning, my boss, would never come to me and say, "You're doing a lousy job," or any of the young college students after I became the first one. He would pick up every jar, a wet cloth, folded, not in any form loose, and pre-soaked in the soapy water. The bottom of every jar be that, well, not ketchup, it's like salt and pepper, whatever. And he wiped the edge of the table to make sure the entire table is clean. And these are the minutiae things that give another learning when I become a nightclub manager in Chicago at Playboy. In fact, I was the first ethnic Chinese, according to the bartenders in the Playboy Club in Walton at that time. So from that point, I have recuperated when the hotel was interchanging, or Playboy had bought in next door the Knickerbocker Hotel, and the shortage of silverware, the shortage supply, the confusion. I managed in such a way that I sent my team of busboys had gone into the supply of the silverware. Yes, literally, we set to have them stolen after 15 memos requesting dinner supply that have no show. We operated our own way. In all that, in the chaos of growing Playboy Club, I also caught the many. It's criminal with the boxes and boxes of lobster tails, of the sirloin that we serve in our restaurant and stairway, eventually case and case of cognac and cases of very expensive liquor. Well, by that by that showing accountability, Marriott noticed me, and Marriott had me recruited in between the time of 73 and 74. And when I got back to college, I got my master's degree on a trial basis. The first 6 credits got to be B and higher. Then I was given the job in the fall, given the status as a graduate student in the counseling program. This part of experience, what I'm trying to highlight here, is where that it is slap in the face, and why the hell did I jump off, giving my middle finger to the system and created our own business? Because before I returned to the college in 74, the same year we got married, I was offered by the Marriott Corporation, based on the work that we have done to catch other shenanigans, borderline criminal, by the waiters embezzling the tickets. In less than 2 years, 3 of the ethnic Chinese waiters managed to buy 3 restaurants by what they have done with the liquor bill much higher than by the penalty, $50 per ticket. This is 1973. And I was offered, after the tackling down in that 9 months with the Marriott, to do the same with the same restaurant in Philadelphia. In and between, I was asked to be with Cornell University for a semester. And my wages at that time, starting from less than 20, was at $24,000 a year. And let me remind you this. Something in life you don't have always step forward. I took a step back. We got married. And after I finished my degrees in 1975, 76, my wage from the university system was only $16,000. But why? Why am I willing to make that huge of a concession? Because I thought the college life will give me a 9-month term, not 12 months. In the summertime, by my experience with other university professors that I have grown up with in Platteville and other universities, I can cultivate a separate business. I was not aiming at my work at the university with a high pay, but I can cultivate another business. And my interest in the color stones and gems has been with me for the longest time. By my family's collections of jade carvings and stone carvings. And then my curiosity about Brazil have always been infinite in the field. So what I'm trying to present here is that I have learned to step back. Okay, I don't make 24,000. I'm at 16,000 after a year and a half getting my master's degree. But the internal side of me, I'm willing to make this concession into academia of 9 months and get 3 months to develop other interest for monetary gains. And after in 2.5 years with the higher education, why I also cannot find the doctoral program could host my 3C system, I took off. Never look back. And this action, I will continue be speaking another tapes, maybe putting all this together, is all about the spirit of the Monkey King. I trust there are millions of Chinese today, even at my age or younger, who have ever have read Journey to the West. In my life, part of the story were told by my 2 aunts. They both separated from their husbands during the Civil War because they were coming from Guangxi, coming from the southwest region. They both commanders and colonels and generals, and got caught by the regime of Mao Zedong or the Chinese communists. And so they fled China along with us and stayed in Macau. And in that 10 years, the exposure is not just Chinese the Latin language and English learning with the boarding school with the Salesians from Italy, but the collective exposure that English become mandatory. And for those of us who have a little bit of a preparation ready to go abroad, we never look back. We never look into what am I going to do after I finish my high school, going back to China for college and universities. China was still in that bit of chaos. And the long-term hostility between the government from Taiwan and mainland China had manifested also in those two colonial cities of Macau and Hong Kong. They were like gangs. If the celebration October 1st for the mainland Chinese and the way they build the platforms and the visuals arts to celebrate, and then the October 10th, there will be the double 10th celebration by the Chinese celebrating with the government from Taiwan. This is we'll be covering in the next segment. I am preparing to talk about the opium wars for the West had turned into opium holocaust. Is much as painful or hurtful for that time and period, 1840s, for 100 years to 1948 is that demarcation and the devastation of the Chinese families, the broken down families, the wealth taken away, that from the opium war that had led China into eventually to call for the republic, or to breaking away from the Qing dynasty, in and between the Versailles Treaty, the mistreatment of the Chinese, and by the Europeans by giving away the German possession of Qingdao in Shandong to the Japanese. In fact, bits and pieces, there were even American companies were financing the Japanese. They don't even look at China. They want to finance the Japanese. They can contain the Russians in Manchuria. But that already had led to eventually the Chinese 8 Years' War with Japan. But in actuality, they started long ago in somewhere in 1931. So I will put this into the opium holocaust and the many collective Chinese diaspora, all the way from the time of the Mongols, just coming down south, the moving further south, the Ming Dynasty, the Song Dynasty, to the Ming Dynasty after the Mongols, and all the other resistance, the Ming people fighting against the Qing Dynasty, including Taiwan, including the famous sea admiral named Zhang Chenggong in Taiwan, who had expelled all the Dutch out of the island of Taiwan. Taiwan became called Formosa in Portuguese, famous. All these names, terms, events, happenings, I will put another category, and collectively I call it the many cultural dissonances. It's not just one, it's not just two, but the collective damage and how the West had Chinese humiliated with opium, with the two Jewish family, the Rothschilds, and their influence of the British Empire and the East Indian Company, and how Sassoon had grown the opium higher and better quality than the opium smuggling into China by the Americans hiding behind China trade. Names like Roosevelt, names like Ford, names like Astor, but they know of shame. They hide behind the China trade, many of them. But all these events have pounding, impacting, hitting China very painfully. Just to give you one of the most painful events, when you're willing to relinquish your cultural identity, denouncing Confucius, is the May 4th movement. That movement of the students from Beijing and the street people all addressing why the Shandong province, why the German possessions who got defeated in the First World War, instead returning to the Chinese by giving away to the Japanese. That had incited tremendous amount of pride. May 4th is just the beginning of the Chinese nationalism. But in the midst of all that, some of the Chinese scholars decided to banish and to abolish the teaching of Confucius. For me, that's very painful. You're willing to let go what has been 3,000+ years of culture to embrace the new ideology. So what I'm talking about in my gem trade, I'm just the offspring of the China chaos. Then we got to Brazil. No one really from our age group have any prospect looking back to head back to China for education. Many of the Chinese from the Southeast Asia, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from Singapore, they were suffering another form of racism and mistreatment in their area. So many of these overseas Chinese who went to Thailand, Cambodia, and whatnot have sent their youngsters back to China for education. But in our case, no. We're already in South America, we're in Brazil, and my two sisters were coming up north for colleges. By me narrating a part of this happening where I created my own industry involving in the gemstone business, a lot of that part of inspiration has always been guided by this outer ego. The extra part of me is the Monkey King. Monkey King was a wire herb. Monkey King was the Western gunslinger, the adventures. But instead, he can make a somersault going to 100,000 leagues or miles. His magic, he can transform himself with 72 different images, from a flying mosquito to an eagle to turn himself into Homer House, a flagpole. He had beaten all the kings and lords in heaven, and he had even insulted the Jade Emperor. And at the very last act, the Buddha showed up and increased himself like the size of a mountain and put out his palm. I love this part, but very few people speak of it. And he told the monkey, I dare you come fly up to my palm. And the picture in images of the Monkey King's posture is almost like, I am the all victorious Monkey King in heaven. He did take a somersault, landed to the palm of the big Buddha. In the story of Monkey King, already multiculturalism, there are characters from Taoism, there are characters from the Buddhism. Again, so I keep using the Western, the Buddhist culture. When he jumped to the palm of the big Buddha, and he did something is the most obnoxious ever. And I like that part of obnoxiousness. It shows the individuality at that time, in that era of the writers. He took a poop in the front and he took a pee in the back of the palm. That was the last draw for the big Buddha. Flip his palm and bury the monkey and told him, you'll be buried on this 5-finger mountains for the next 500 years. And somebody will come from the Tang era, and they will be able to break the code, and you will have to follow him as a disciple. All in all, if you have all the Western independence with the six shooters, be that the cowboys afraid of rattlesnakes or herding cattle and whatever, stampeding. The Western culture had impressed upon all youngsters when we were in Macau. And all these Western novels, you can start up with Prince Valiant to the Knight of the Round Table. In fact, one of my early idea concept about the Knights of the Round Table, a democracy, is when all the knights put their swords onto the table. So whatever concept, the visual arts of the Hollywood had influenced the world and us, because US is the only country that is intact and not destroyed. I have zero qualm about people, some Chinese accused jokingly that we are so westernized, we don't have any ligament attachment to the Chinese. On the contrary, I think the Monkey King had lived in me and in many of the Chinese since I was 6, 7 years old. His audacity, his dexterity, his obnoxiousness, even because he's so fast, you can see his eyes are trained, you can see a demon or the ghosts or the ghostlings. That they are coming up from heaven, earth, and down below is the dark area, the dark side of the yin yang, and they were punished to come down, and this ghostlings were feeding on oftentimes of the human themselves. Either they can find a way to redeem themselves and get back to heaven, or they will stay permanently um, in the lower zones of the Chinese earth, sky, earth, and the dark region. And this is all the same characters. The four guardians of the Tang monk, starting with the Monkey King, and then Pixie the pig face, and then the Sandman, and then the horse, which is the white dragon. So for all the youngsters, of course, we do not have exposure of the story, the Dream of the Rat Chamber. We are fully aware of that. The Tale of the Three Kingdoms, yes, often been told. We read many of the story and about the human manipulation. Machiavelli got a long way to go if people who listen to read the Tale of the Three Kingdoms. And then the next one is the 108 Marshmen. At least the four novels with exposure of the three for most boys. So in the way I'm talking about the culture of the gemstones, the independence, the feistiness, giving my finger to the American college system, by what I have witnessed, there was not the immediate future by the shenanigans I personally have tasted. Because in both times I worked for the Playboy and Marriott Corporation, I was picked and paid because of my efficiency. It's basically, you can talk about economic forensics, catching crimes within the industry. So back to this story with the gemstones, going back to the little story about how much can I get this one stone, asking for 2,200, and I can offer for 1,500. I may get it, I may not get it. Why? Here's very simple. There are different culture zones behind him. I know the young man. I know who he's been talking with. When I'm buying stones, I notice that stone. I said, well, I'll look at it later on. By his contact, his association, rumor I've heard that he is already wanting to sell the stone because somebody, just typical Brazil, somebody coming up from the bushes, Josette, something I want you to see. Well, he asking for the stone for 2,200. But somebody is showing him another parcel of the mineral rough by his seeing it. He know that parcel can give him also great gains because he's looking at the rough. He can cut himself, or his family can do the preform and shape. He already have an idea. So depending how much that parcel is asking for, maybe more than the 1500 or the 2200, by packaging it and by leveraging it, I might get my stone for 1500, especially on a Friday, because most people rest up on a Saturday. I even use Saturday to my own gains. What do you think about it? I don't do business with anybody else. If you consider that is possible at 1500, call me on Saturday. I'll be leaving. Well, anyway, you you learn with three cluster of cultures and the dynamics, what is happening in this little cluster of economics in the gem business in open piazza. So language, listen skill, you know something is going on, and to be truth, I got it for 1500 eventually. Just because I'm aware of the fact he and his partner and his family is eyeing the parcel of tourmaline coming out of the woods just that particular morning. So what is our buying skill? What is so challenging and fun in my years engagement with the stone purchasing, be it one stone or the cluster of stones, or negotiating something coming forward. No less than I'm buying stone directly from Afghanistan by way of Peshawar, delivered to Bangkok 6 years ago before COVID. Now they bring it to Hong Kong. Say how much saving, and bring the Hong Kong to now into China, willing to take Chinese currency. Yes, I used to sell with higher markup to my buyers from Beijing, from Shanghai. They will come down to Hong Kong, come down to Shenzhen. For those who cannot cross the border, I can deliver them into their hands. And that's also a black market system when the currency can bring it back by way of Macau or Hong Kong. I can get my cash in Hong Kong dollar or in dollar itself. These are all the many dynamics, I call it. There are the many situations that I can articulate. But when I was starting buying gemstone by way of Facebook, I told them, don't put into the Facebook as a private iMessenger. Well, every now and then shit happens, but happen for the better. From the days of Brazil to today, buying stones in my house and my own setting, delivering parcels and parcels of stones into Bangkok first, Hong Kong next, Shenzhen inside China. And this is part of the story that I will stop. And for this week, I have done all into 5 segments in English. And by next week, I would do it in Portuguese. And again, most of my commitment, my devotion of this development, the bringing gemstone trade all the way into AI, is dedicated to help as many the Brazilians, garimpeiros, the raw minerals seekers, adventurers, gamblers. And then next week, I will do all the 5 days, at least 5 segments, repeating in Portuguese. And the week following, I will do that also in Cantonese. In the meantime, I will continue to use my ChatGPT system that I'm using to develop my educational program. From the same website, you can see the psychology round and square, and now the ongoing, the pedagogy of conscience. For those who are interested, can email me, text me on my phone. If anyone want me to have a richer emphasis in particular segment, I'll be happy to work with you. In the meantime, thank you, and I look forward for our next encounter. Brother